Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 8, The Battle of Badr, 15th of March, 624 Modern Era, Arabian Peninsula. Muslim forces, approximately 300 men. Mecca's forces, approximately 900 men. Muhammad's triumph at Badr did more than simply confirm his leadership. It forged his destiny as the unchallenged beacon of Islam. The sight of his small, victorious force, defeating overwhelming odds, sent ripples through the desert tribes, who were both awed and inspired. Drawn by the undeniable force of his will and the purported divine favor that seemed to shield him, desert tribes flocked to his banner. Their allegiance transformed the young and modest faith into a sweeping tide, igniting the unstoppable expansion of Islam across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond.
In the dawn of the 7th century, within the bustling streets of Mecca, a young man began to experience visions and hear mysterious voices. To him, these were not mere figments of the mind, but profound revelations, resonating with the undeniable weight of divine inspiration. Despite his inability to read or write, in his visions, the young man found himself absorbing sacred texts, as if they were being imprinted directly onto his soul, indelibly inscribed on his heart by a divine hand. These heavenly utterances would soon become the verses of the Quran, the sacred scripture that would forever guide the faithful in the path of Islam. With a heart aflame with conviction, Muhammad sought to share his divine encounters with the people of Mecca. Yet, instead of acceptance, he was met with a wall of skepticism and hostility. At this pivotal moment, Mecca stood as a vital hub of trade in Arabia, a city where the crossroads of Christian and Jewish commerce converged, deeply influencing its economy and society. When Muhammad's teachings began to challenge the entrenched business practices of Mecca's powerful merchants, particularly those of the ruling Quraysh clan, they swiftly exerted their influence, pressuring Muhammad's kin to stifle his prophetic voice. Yet, Abu Talib, the steadfast leader of Muhammad's clan and his protective uncle, defied these demands, refusing to betray his nephew. In retaliation, the Quraysh imposed a harsh economic boycott on the entire clan, aiming to break their will. As the sands of time slipped by, the threats against Muhammad grew more ominous, transforming from whispered warnings into overt menaces that darkened his every step. The precise reasons for the merchants' fear are shrouded in speculation, yet it seems likely they dreaded the possibility that Muhammad's wisdom would win the hearts of the masses, turning his pronouncements into a powerful force that could threaten their wealth. The merchants' anxieties extended beyond mere profit. They feared that Muhammad's rising popularity would translate into political clout, a force that could one day dismantle their control over Mecca's government and disrupt their lucrative enterprises. Driven by these fears, they conspired to silence or expel the troublesome prophet. And when Abu Talib died in 619, his successor proved far less tolerant of Muhammad's growing influence. In the year 620, fate led Muhammad to cross paths with a group of citizens from Medina, a city nestled some 200 miles to the north of Mecca. Captivated by Muhammad's compelling character and profound wisdom, they entreated him to come to Medina, seeking his guidance as an impartial arbitrator in the midst of their long-standing feuds. Initially, Muhammad hesitated, reluctant to leave his birthplace. Yet by the following year, a dozen Medinans had solemnly sworn to recognize him as God's prophet, their fervor compelling him to reconsider. Despite their vows, Muhammad remained cautious, sending trusted associates ahead to Medina to assess the situation, mindful of the risks and responsibilities that lay before him. But when 75 Medinans in 622 pledged their swords and their souls to his cause. Vowing to follow him in battle as well as in faith, Muhammad's resolve was finally steeled. The time had come for him to make the fateful journey. For months, Muhammad had been quietly orchestrating the migration of his Meccan followers, sending them in small, unnoticed groups to Medina. This secret exodus unfolded beneath the very noses of Mecca's vigilant merchants who remained oblivious to the gathering storm. It was only when it was too late, when Muhammad had already vanished into the shadow of the night, that the Meccan elites realized the gravity of their mistake. He had evaded their grasp, heading to Medina, where their watchful eyes could no longer reach, and where he would forge a new power base. Upon his arrival in Medina, Muhammad's unyielding will began to work its influence, drawing many of the citizens' inhabitants into the fold of Islam. Yet not all were swayed. Some of the Jewish and pagan citizens remained distant, watching with wary eyes as his movement grew. Facing the harsh realities of Medina's sparse oasis, where farming yielded little, Muhammad and his Meccan followers, accustomed to a life of trade, turned to a more daring enterprise. They resolved to survive by striking at the heart of Mecca's wealth, launching raids on the caravans of their former associates. As 623 drew to a close, Muhammad's raids grew bolder and more frequent, with larger contingents of men sent to intercept the rich Meccan caravans. Yet whispers of treachery reached his ears. Spies within Medina had been alerting the caravans, allowing many to slip through the ambushes unscathed. Determined to outmaneuver the informants, in January of 624, Muhammad dispatched a small, elite band of followers under the cover of secrecy, handing them sealed orders to thwart any leaks. This time, their movements remained hidden, and the mission proceeded without a whisper of betrayal. The sealed orders contained a precise and daring command. The 12 men were to intercept a modest caravan, making its way from Yemen to Mecca. Disguising themselves as pilgrims, they blended seamlessly into the unsuspecting group, biding their time until the moment was right. But as they prepared to strike, a significant dilemma emerged. It was the sacred month, a time during which the spilling of blood was forbidden by Arabian custom, a stricture that placed them in a perilous moral and tactical quandary. If they chose to wait until the sacred month had passed, they would be forced to confront their quarry in the very heart of Mecca, where the sanctity of the city further prohibited any act of violence. The stakes were dangerously high. Weighing their options, the men made a fateful decision. Better to violate the sanctity of the holy month than to challenge the inviolable peace of Mecca itself. In a swift and decisive strike, they overpowered the caravan's guards, slaying one and capturing 2 others, sealing their fate with blood. As news of the raid spread, criticism mounted against Muhammad for this breach of sacred tradition. Yet, with unwavering conviction, he countered that the relentless persecution of Muslims by Meccan merchants was a sin far greater than any violation of the holy month, justifying the act in the eyes of his followers. In Mecca, the audacity of the raid was beyond intolerable. It was a brazen assault on their pride and their power. To strike back, the Meccans devised a cunning plan. A rich caravan laden with goods from Gaza and led by the influential Quraysh merchant Abu Sufyan would serve as bait, luring Muhammad and his followers into the jaws of a decisive confrontation. The trap was set, and it worked as intended. Muhammad, sensing an opportunity, rallied a force of about 300 men, preparing them for a bold strike. In early March 624, they marched out of Medina, their hearts set on the riches of the caravan and the promise of victory. The odds were daunting. This small army was mostly on foot, with only 70 camels and a mere 2 horses to their name. They took turns riding and marching, the vast desert stretching endlessly before them, a test of endurance as much as of faith. But Abu Sufyan was no fool. He soon caught wind of the impending threat. Swiftly, he dispatched messengers to Mecca, and the city answered his call with nearly 1,300 warriors, led by the fierce Abu Jahl, ready to crush the upstart prophet. The Meccan force was formidable. An army outfitted with 700 camels, 100 horses, and 600 infantry clad in protective mail, their strength and numbers far surpassing Muhammad's modest band. Ever cautious, Abu Sufyan took it upon himself to scout the enemy's position. Upon discovering Muhammad's location, he cunningly redirected his caravan along a safer route, ultimately reaching Mecca unscathed. From there, he sent word to Abu Jahl, informing him of his successful evasion. With the caravan safe, some of Abu Jahl's men began to question the need for further action. Sensing the futility of continued conflict, 400 men broke ranks, defying Abu Jahl's command and returning home. But Abu Jahl's pride would not allow retreat. His desire to eradicate Muhammad and the threat he posed to Mecca's supremacy burned too fiercely. He pressed on, resolute in his determination to end this once and for all. To rally his remaining forces, Abu Jahl declared their next destination the wells of Badr, some 25 miles southwest of Mecca. There, he promised they would celebrate the caravan's safe return with a show of strength that would echo through the ages. Little did he know that at those very wells, Muhammad's men lay in wait, ready to confront the Meccan force in a battle that would alter the very course of history. As scouts brought news of Abu Jahl's approach, Muhammad convened a council under the dimming light of the evening on March 14th, 624. The time had come to decide their fate. The Meccan followers, known as the emigrants, quickly pledged their unwavering support. Yet Muhammad sought more. He needed to gauge the resolve of the Medinan followers, called the Helpers, whose faith had yet to be tested in the fires of battle. When the Helpers too swore their allegiance with a fervor equal to that of the emigrants, Muhammad's heart swelled with pride. His men were ready, their faith unshakable. He assured them with quiet confidence that victory was within their grasp. Following the strategic counsel of his trusted lieutenant, Abu Bakr, Muhammad positioned his forces around the well nearest the approaching Meccan army. With tactical precision, they sealed the remaining wells, cutting off the enemy's access to water. And so they waited, their nerves taut with anticipation. That night, the heavens opened and rain fell, a divine omen, as the Quran later described, sent to purify the Muslims and to firm up the shifting sands beneath their feet, preparing the ground for the coming clash. As the night wore on, it is said that Muhammad's men slept peacefully, their minds at ease. But Muhammad himself did not rest. Instead, he spent the night deep in prayer, seeking guidance and strength for the trial that lay ahead. As dawn broke, Abu Jahl's force drew closer to Badr, their water supplies nearly depleted. To their dismay, they found Muhammad's army entrenched on the higher ground, overlooking the last remaining well, a vantage point that gave the Muslims a critical advantage. From his tent, positioned to oversee the battlefield, Muhammad commanded his men to hold their ground, their bows ready. They were to await his signal, refraining from attacking until the Meccans made the first move, at which point they would unleash a deadly rain of arrows. Yet the calm before the storm was broken as 3 Meccan warriors strode forth from the enemy lines, issuing a bold challenge to the Muslims, a call to arms that would ignite the battle. 3 Muslim soldiers immediately stepped forward to accept the challenge, but the Meccans dismissed them, demanding instead to face members of Muhammad's own clan in combat. In response, Ubaidah bin al-Harith, along with Muhammad's valiant uncle Hamza and his fierce cousin Ali, rose to meet the challenge, prepared to defend their honor and their faith. Hamza and Ali wasted no time. With swift and deadly precision, they vanquished their challengers, then rushed to aid Ubaidah, who was locked in a struggle for his life. Though Ubaidah emerged victorious, his wounds were grievous, and a few days later he succumbed to his injuries. Ubaidah was honored as the first martyr in the cause of Islam, his sacrifice forever etched into the annals of history. After a few more individual duels, the tension broke, and the Meccan forces launched their full-scale assault, charging toward the Muslim lines with a fury that had been building for days. The Muslims, holding the high ground as ordered, unleashed a relentless barrage of arrows, cutting into the advancing Meccans, their resolve unshaken by the onslaught below. In the midst of the chaos, Muhammad experienced another profound vision, a revelation that not only foretold their victory, but also promised divine intervention in the form of angelic warriors, mounted and ready to descend upon the battlefield. Awakened from his vision, Muhammad seized a handful of sand or gravel, casting it into the air with the words, quote, "Confusion sees their faces," end quote. The Quran, 8:17. Invoking divine disarray upon his enemies. In that moment, as if in answer to his prayer, a sudden sandstorm is said to have swept across the battlefield, blinding and disorienting the Meccan forces. In the aftermath, Meccan prisoners recounted tales of being overwhelmed and captured by warriors on horseback, even though the Muslim forces were known to possess only 2 horses. These accounts fueled the belief that angelic riders had indeed joined the fray. Many attributed this inexplicable occurrence to the intervention of the angels, fulfilling the prophecy of Muhammad's vision. Whatever the truth of these accounts, one fact was undeniable. The Meccan assault was faltering, and seizing the moment, Muhammad ordered his men to advance, driving the enemy back. The Meccan forces, their morale shattered, broke ranks and fled, abandoning the battlefield to the Muslims. 70 of their number lay dead, and another 70 were taken prisoner. Among the fallen was Abu Jahl, who had been wounded in the fighting. In his final moments, he refused to acknowledge Allah as the true victor, and for his defiance, he was beheaded, his life ending as ignominiously as his campaign against Muhammad had begun. Born as Amru bin Hisham, and once revered by the Quraysh as Abu Iloim, the father of wisdom, his legacy was forever altered by the defeat at Badr. In the eyes of the Muslims, he would henceforth be known as Abu Jahl, the father of folly. The Muslim victory at Badr was not merely a military triumph. It heralded Muhammad's emergence as a formidable political leader, solidifying his stature alongside his spiritual authority. In overcoming a force 3 times the size of his own, Muhammad's military genius was cast in a new and radiant light, his strategic brilliance becoming the stuff of local legend. Though history may credit divine intervention, the victory was rooted in sound tactics. Muhammad's forces held the high ground with fresh, rested troops, while their enemies were weary and parched, a fundamental yet decisive advantage. The tales of angelic intervention and the timely sandstorm find their origins in the verses of the Quran, and while secular historians may neither confirm nor deny these elements, they remain an inseparable part of the battle's enduring mystique. Regardless of the divine or mundane nature of the details, the outcome was indisputable. Muhammad's men emerged victorious at Badr. The defeat at Badr dealt a crushing psychological blow to Mecca, as many of its leading citizens lay dead on the battlefield or languished as prisoners, their freedom hinging on ransom. In the aftermath, the spoils of Abu Jahl's shattered army were divided equally among Muhammad's followers, a practice that extended to all present, whether they had fought on the front lines or guarded from the rear. This decision, though contentious among some soldiers, was upheld by Muhammad and would be reaffirmed a year later, solidifying his stance on the equitable distribution of spoils. The Battle of Uhud, fought on the outskirts of Medina on March 23, 625, would test the resolve of the Muslim forces as they faced a grueling defeat on the battlefield. Yet despite their victory, the Meccans chose to withdraw, a decision that spared Muhammad's reputation from any lasting damage, preserving his status as a leader favored by fate. Struggling to comprehend their defeat despite Allah's favor, Muhammad attributed the setback to divine retribution, a punishment for the greed that had crept into their hearts, tempting them with the lure of plunder. Paradoxically, the Meccans' failure to press their advantage only deepened Muhammad's mystique, as their retreat cast them in the light of fear, hesitant to confront the full measure of his power. Though the Muslim infantry fought valiantly and even outmatched their attackers, it was the superior Meccan cavalry that ultimately tipped the scales, securing the day for Mecca. A year after Uhud, Mecca's forces would return with renewed vengeance, laying siege to Medina, determined to crush Muhammad's burgeoning power. Despite the Meccans bringing an overwhelming force of 10,000 to 13,000 men and 600 cavalry to bear against Medina, Muhammad's leadership once again delivered victory from the jaws of overwhelming odds. In a stroke of strategic brilliance, Muhammad ordered a vast trench to be dug before their defensive positions, rendering the Meccan cavalry, a force previously decisive, utterly impotent. Frustrated and unfamiliar with the demands of siege warfare, the Meccan forces soon grew weary, abandoning their siege and retreating home in defeat. With each passing test, Muhammad's reputation only grew, his aura of invincibility solidifying with every victory. In 630, Muhammad's army achieved the ultimate triumph, capturing his former home of Mecca. The city that had once spurned him now became the very beating heart of Islam, its spiritual and temporal center. This conquest marked the crowning achievement of Muhammad's illustrious career, solidifying his unparalleled legacy as a political, military, and religious leader. Yet the sands of his life were nearly run, and he would live only 2 more years. In 632, Muhammad passed from this world, his mantle of leadership falling to Abu Bakr, who swiftly crushed all opposition, firmly establishing his authority as the first caliph by 633. But it was at Badr that the course of history was irreversibly set into motion. Before Badr, Muhammad was a religious leader of modest means, his influence confined to a very small following, and his actions limited to skirmishes and raids that, while daring, did little to shake the foundations of Mecca. Yet the Meccans had seen in him a potential for greatness, and in this, their fear was well-founded. After Badr, Muhammad's power in Medina was solidified as he systematically crushed or exiled those who opposed him, particularly the Jewish clans who still had ties to the Quraysh, severing any lingering connections to his former adversaries. His influence now extended beyond Medina, drawing the support of outlying Bedouin tribes whose fierce and warlike nature would soon bolster his military might. Abu Jahl had marched to Badr with the clear intent of slaying Muhammad and extinguishing the nascent flame of his religion. Had the Meccans triumphed that day, they might well have achieved their aim. Instead, from that day forward, Islam began its inexorable spread across Arabia, sweeping into the Middle East, North Africa, Southeastern Europe, and beyond into the vast expanses of Asia. Badr stands as one of those rare battles where the number of men who fought was extremely small, but the consequences were nothing short of monumental.